We are in peak fantasy football draft season. You may have already drafted. You may have more drafts coming up this week. Well, we've got you covered. On today's episode, we are breaking down 6 draft strategies that will help you win your fantasy league in 2023. You are on the clock. It is time to make your pick. Your first, second, and third picks will determine your fantasy team's roster construction. If you're going to take Travis Kelce, you're going to need a plan that allows you to avoid being shallow at running back and wide receiver. If you're going to start wide receiver, you need a plan to correctly pick the right RBs in the dead zone. Understanding how each pick stacks up on top of each other will allow you to make the optimal draft day decisions. We've gone through 6 of the most popular draft strategies, and we are sharing our thoughts on how to start and finish these builds with potential opportunity costs, where to find value, and if this is a strategy we'll actually use on draft day. We have teams that we have mocked and ready to show you today using these different strategies. Aidan, why don't you start us off with what I think is the best strategy for 2023, Hero RB?
So I think Hero RB is definitely one of the most common strategies, especially given what fantasy has looked like over the last 5 or 10 years. Typically, running backs go heavy in the first round. We're definitely starting to see a bit of a shift away from that, but typically for my drafts, I'm really trying to get out of there with a running back in that first, maybe even second at the beginning of the second round to really anchor my team. So Hero RB in a nutshell is really grabbing one of those top, say 4 to 6 running backs to really anchor your team. And then you can hammer other positions for the next, say, 3, 4, 5 rounds, depending on how comfortable you are waiting with other positions, as you don't really need another strong running back to go alongside him. So looking at my team here, I got Saquon Barkley. I personally thought a couple of the other running backs would fall to me here at the 9 spot. There was a kind of bizarre run running backs early on. I was thinking I might have my picking between Bijan or Saquon, but for the Hero RB build, I'm okay with either one of those guys. I see those guys as pretty much weekly top 5 plays at their position, especially in PPR leagues. So getting Saquon really anchored down that running back position, whereas you'll kind of see as I went later on in the draft with other running backs, it's going to be a bit of a revolving door, and that's totally okay. I've got 4 other running backs that I like. I like J.K. Dobbins, I like James Cook, I like Khalil Herbert, and I like Jaylen Warren. Those guys are all probably running backs 2, 3, 4s. It's not guys you're going to be starting every single week, but I'm able to play matchups if someone goes down. I've got a couple different pieces there that I can kind of play around with. And Saquon is kind of there as a security blanket. So let's say, one of them only goes for 10 points. I've got Saquon, I'm pretty much expecting 15 to 20 as a minimum from Saquon every week. And that's really the gist of Hero RB is like Saquon is going to hold it down for the running back position, which really gave me the kind of ability to just hammer wide receivers there in rounds 2 to 4, like you could see. So you could do a number of different things in these rounds. Personally, I'm always going to go wide receiver in that next round. I absolutely want to get my first wide receiver on the board. I came back and hammered another one. So I had ARSB and DK to start, which I was thrilled about. Once I get to round 4, that's maybe somewhere where I'd start looking at quarterback potentially. There was no one there that I really liked. I could have reached on a couple guys, but at that point, especially in a 2-flex league, I like to put wide receivers in my flex. So for that reason, I went wide receiver over running back in that position. Passing on Kenneth Walker was a tough one, especially because I like Amari Cooper. I'm not in love with Amari Cooper, but as my wide receiver 3, I felt really good about that, especially looking at some of the RBs that I knew would be there on the way back. So looking at that through 4 rounds, I've got 3 really strong wide receivers who I can depend on every week. Saquon, and then I finally dipped back into that running back pool. I already kind of touched on the running backs, so I'm going to kind of just start skipping around a bit more in terms of how it kind of played out from there. So finally got back to running back, which I felt good about. I had another running back to go with Saquon. Bring it on back. You could go another running back if you want. It kind of defeats the purpose of going Saquon that early to then double dip on RBs, but you absolutely could. There's no reason why at that point I couldn't have taken a James Conner or a Javonte Williams. You could absolutely do that if that's your preference. But the opportunity cost of Christian Watson there as my wide receiver 4 was really tantalizing to me. So I was like, I absolutely want that. I'm going to grab another one on the way back. Give me James Cook there. So I've got 3 running backs. Feeling good. At that point, I was like, it's probably time to address quarterback. If you kind of look at the guys that went there in round, what is that, 7? Not a single quarterback went there, so I didn't really feel like I was in a huge rush, given I had kind of already missed out on the top 6 or 7 guys. There wasn't a huge rush to get one. I'm comfortable with Dak. I'm comfortable with Tua, who I ended up with. Even Deshaun Watson, I'm cool with. So I was like, I'm going to get one of those guys, bring that on the way back, snag my QB. Given what I'm expecting from Tua, I think we should all be expecting best case from Tua that he's not going to get hurt and he's going to be healthy. And a healthy Tua, you can likely have as a single QB. Depending on how many bench spots you have in your league, it might make sense to double dip on a guy like, if you look at some of these guys at the end, Purdy or Wilson, someone else is just a bit of an insurance plan, but that's not the route that I went here. You've got Herbert on the way back as my 3rd QB, and I got my first tight end. We'll get into more of kind of tight end strategies as we've got a couple different ways to navigate this, but I waited on one. Didn't feel the need to go after a guy like Njoku or Schultz or some of those guys in the middle range, so grabbed Kincaid there. I think he's got a ton of upside, which I was super excited about. And then I kind of just take 2 more swings at wide receivers of guys that we really like. So you've got Bateman there as my wide receiver 5. And then I bring it home with Nico Collins as the wide receiver 1 in Houston. So really fun draft here. I think Saquon just gave me the flexibility to just hammer wide receiver. And I think with a 2 flex roster, I think just to take a step back, knowing your roster construction and how to really maximize where to take certain players is super important going into your drafts. Because if I had, let's say, just 1 flex spot, I'm probably leaning a guy like Kenneth Walker or a running back in that 4th round. But given I had 2 flexes, it felt like it made a lot of sense to hammer that. So I felt really good about this. What do you guys think about kind of Hero RB in general and how I navigated through this one?
I love the last 5 picks here. So you've already got, J.K. Dobbins is going to be a starting running back. Sure, he will lose touchdown opportunity to Lamar Jackson and the other backs, but James Cook is also another starting running back. You get your quarterback, and then Khalil Herbert, like a late-round flyer on a guy who will probably get a majority of the touches for the Bears. Kincaid upside, and then Bateman, Warren, Collins. Spoiler alert, I also have a Nico Collins last pick in one of my mock drafts, but this is, I honestly think one of the biggest inefficiencies of drafts right now is Rashad Bateman being valued in this range. So I love the way you wrap this all together, and then you take out an insurance policy on the Najee team with Jaylen Warren late in your draft, and it's a really solid RB room, after only drafting 1 in the first 4 rounds.
I think you nailed it, Aidan, in terms of Hero RB. And what's nice is you can basically hit a Hero RB with McCaffrey, Eckler, Bijan, Saquon. Honestly, I'd feel comfortable doing a Hero RB with Tony Pollard, Nick Chubb, and Josh Jacobs. I think those are all the guys. I had to do a Hero RB with Jahmyr Gibbs in a draft. It was a little sketchy, but I ended up drafting Dameon Pierce with him, so I feel okay with that. But I think if you go Hero RB and your next 3, you take a running back and your next 3 positions are wide receiver, right? If you didn't have 2 flex spots, you easily could have taken a second. You could just take your quarterback there, and then you could then take wide receiver and Christian Watson, Kenneth Walker. You've got options. If you are doing a Hero RB, I still would want to get my second running back within the first 6 rounds.
Yep.
Maybe the
Agreed.
7th round. I want, even though it's kind of the dead zone, Dameon Pierce is a great target if you go Hero RB. I like J.K. Dobbins. I like, Kenneth Walker feels a little bit more robust with the boys, to be honest. But James Cook is great. Khalil Herbert is great. I think Jaylen Warren. These are all guys I want to draft. So I think you nailed it, and you can take the upside swings because you have an anchor in Saquon Barkley.
Exactly.
I like it. Before moving on to Keegan's draft strategy, thumb up, thumb down. We think this is a winner, right? We think this is probably the best way to approach a draft. Because I think you can do it from a lot of different slots. Okay, I'd say this is the best way to approach a draft, in my opinion. So this is thumbs up.
Yeah.
Keegan, you are our resident zero RB truther. You have the zero RB floor. Tell us how you would approach zero RB in 2023.
I think with the value of wide receivers in this year's draft being so propelled, when you do zero RB like this, which I've done in the past, it has to be true zero RB. I mean, like you have to stack four wide receivers and make sure that you think you have some of the four best starting options on your team when you do this. One of the favorite spots for me personally to do this from when you're drafting is the late round or the beginning. So if I'm at the beginning, I do like a Justin Jefferson, Chris Olave, and then maybe get like a McLaurin, London, something situation like that. But I'm at the back half here, right? So I'm going to start with AJ Brown, Devontae Adams. Right off the bat, I already know I have two wide receivers who potentially finish top 10 at the position. And then when it gets back to me, I definitely lose out on some guys that I would have liked to be at the turn, like Calvin or DK, but I'm super happy to take somebody like Debo and Keenan Allen for my top four wide receivers. I think, especially with this flex format where you're playing multiple wide receivers, and I agree with Aidan. I want to start wide receivers in the flex. I just think they have more upside, and I believe that's true the way to chase wins in fantasy. You can't really play it with safe floors in those extra flex positions. So I look at this and I'm like, this is great, right? Like I really love the way that this kind of like played out. And another thing too is like you have to pay attention. Now, obviously these are mocks and we're drafting against kind of like computer generated picks, but if you're paying attention to team 11, team 10, seeing where they're going, like with wide receivers too, it's important. Like you want to stack up those wide receivers against them too and make sure you're not missing value. But I love the start here. You just get four guys who would probably never leave your lineup the entire season, in a perfect situation. And that's just my favorite way to kind of start if you're going to do this. And then what gets a little tricky here is navigating, okay, when is it time to take my first running back? Now, in a situation like this, I went with a guy who I think has 3 down upside and Miles Sanders and who will be the lead back in his backfield for a majority of the season if everything goes right. Guys I would have liked here, like J.K. Dobbins would have been a great way to start this. I'd be fine with Madison. It is a bit of a bummer how this one shook out a little bit, but I still love the build, right? Because what I do after that, I think is the key here. Miles Sanders might not be my perfect pick at the wrap, but I go ahead and I grab what I think can be an elite tight end this year because I want to shore up that position as well too. Because when you're building these kind of like zero RB builds or like a robust RB build where you're kind of losing out on other positional value, I think it's really important to snag somebody that can balance out your other positions, right? Because you're going to have some pitfalls at a position that you're ignoring in your draft strategy. So I know I'm ignoring running back. I should probably go ahead and get a tight end I think I really like. And Kyle Pitts in the 6th round value I think is really good. I mean, such a crazy athlete. And then right after that, what I'm doing is I'm just hammering backs. And these turns are a great opportunity to snag 2 guys, right? So I also went the James Cook route. I think it's one of all of our favorite picks in these later rounds because starting running back, Buffalo Bills, can catch the ball. Remember, this is full PPR format. I think that's a great pick in these. I go ahead with A.J. Dillon right after that, who I think is more of a safe floor play rather than a high upside play, but I think he gives me a lot of balance in a running back room like this where, if anything were to happen to Aaron Jones, I think A.J. Dillon is going to be a fantastic, like later round flyer. And also just with the way the Packers offense should be this year, he's a running back that I want to target in this area because they will have a balanced offensive attack and he's going to be on the field. It's not a all Aaron Jones backfield, right? Like this is going to be a shared backfield. So I want to make sure I can get a player here that I think has a safe floor. And then when I go back to the next wrap here, now it's time to get another running back. So now I've got 4 and my team is balanced positionally. So I've got 4 running backs. I've got 4 wide receivers that I really, really like. I take Samaje Perine, who will have some immediate usage value just because Javonte is going to be working back from a knee injury. Also, I think Sean Payton uses running backs in a really productive manner for fantasy. So I kind of love Samaje as a late round guy. And I go ahead and get a quarterback in Daniel Jones, who I think is extremely inefficient like value. I don't think Daniel Jones should be going in the 10th here, but hey, he is, and I'll take him there all day with some rushing upside. And I don't feel like I need another quarterback with that draft pick either. And then at the end here, also another Jaylen Warren pick. It's very obvious to, I think, me and everybody else on this podcast that he's such a good value at the end of these drafts for everything I just said about Aiden's. And then I take a little swing here with Marvin Mims in the last round, especially with the Judy injury, and they just don't have a lot of bodies. He's going to get some immediate run, but some of these players are not my perfect picks, I would say, for a like heavy wide receiver build, but it's hard to argue when your first four guys are AJ Brown, Devontae Adams, Deebo Samuel, Keegan Allen. And this is kind of me looking at what's going on in front of me, right? Like, okay, Amari Cooper is going right before me, and then I know he's only got one running back, a quarterback, wide receiver, so he could kind of go anywhere. I don't want to take a risk on maybe shooting for somebody I'm going to miss out on. I'll take Keenan. I'm just watching the board here and seeing the trend of drafts, and I'm like, okay, a lot of running backs have gone here. That's why I go with Miles Sanders, right? Because I don't love Kamara there or Cam Akers, James Conner. Their team is massively tanking, so I know like that's when my time is to strike and start taking a running back and get a position in there. And then the rest of the draft, yeah, like I think in a zero RB build, you're always going to have one portion of your board that will just be running back, running back, running back right there. Like that shred of green right there with a little tight end sprinkled. I think it should look like that, especially if your four guys are like this, Now, I can't say that this is always the most efficient way to draft a fantasy football league, but I've done it many times, and it honestly is one of my favorite ways personally to build a team because I love looking at these wide receivers. Every week I'm going to have AJ Brown, Devontae, Deebo starting on my team. I can't be mad at that.
The format here we have is a one quarterback, two running backs, two wide receivers, two flexes, and a tight end. If you just have three flexes, I would take three wide receivers, quarterback, tight end, and then you start hammering running backs. But if you're in a situation where you play four wide receivers, I think the zero RB really becomes a viable solution here because you're sitting in a situation where you have like the four horsemen of the apocalypse. You have like four wide receivers here that could see a over 26% target share in a full point PPR league. And then really you're just kind of cobbling together running back, taking swings, taking opportunities, contingency upside with Dylan, contingency upside with Warren. P. Ryan could be a 50-50 split, could be his backfield by the end of the year if something happens with Javonte. And then Miles Sanders is going to be a volume back. I don't really love him this year, but if you are going to go zero, he kind of fits the zero RB mold.
Yeah, barring injury or anything happening to him, he will have a 3-down workload, and he'll get tons of volume. And they're going to lean on him to balance out that offense with Bryce Young. So I got comfortable. But like I said, there's a run of running backs that I would have liked here. And if you really want to play the upside game, like I would start a zero RB build with DeAndre Swift, and I would have doubled down on running back here had he been there. And then you would have been really talking nice to me. But you have to let the board speak to you sometimes. And what the board was telling me was like, all right, it's time. You got to go get your running back. You don't love who else is there. Get a good tight end that you think can be top 5, top 4 this year, and then just wait for some more value to sink here.
Pitt's build with zero RB is just insane. You were scaring off home league people faster than
you are fearless.
You're fearless. This is truly it's chef's kiss. It's like way to just go for it.
You have to.
When I saw that, I was like, yeah, because I typically don't lean on this type of strategy because you need one or two things to go right for your running backs. You might need, like Javonte to have a setback. If any of these RBs kind of miss, like it can get dark pretty fast for the team, which is why like it's not the most common strategy. But like if all the things fall the right way, like this team is an absolute wagon by the time you get to playoffs, and your league mates are absolutely, terrified. It's like, how did you pull this one off? But like, it's for the bold for sure. And I think the other second thing I wanted to note too was doing this type of build and that you already noted on was doing this in the middle of the order is really hard to pull off. I think
doing hard
it at the wraps or like the 1-2 or the 11-12 or whatever.
It's pretty easy to do it on.
They're much easier because you know what pool are there, and then you're just like double dip, and we just keep it moving. It's like Whereas in the middle, you're like, okay, so what? You start with Tyreek Hill. Like, I'm not exactly sure he's coming back. Like, this one ended up working out to where it's like, okay, I got ARSB too, and then you got Ridley. So, like, this one would have been fine. It's a lot harder to predict what's going to happen in the middle of the draft versus those ends. So, I think you made an awesome point on that. But, this is a fun one.
Let's call it spade a spade. Zero RB, you're kind of a dirtbag, like, looking at injury reports and hoping guys
It's not
get
for the faint of heart.
suspended.
I'll tell you that.
You're looking for a guy to get benched. You're rooting for like the downfall of a lot
Yeah.
of like people that probably don't deserve to have their downfalls rooted. You're kind of like you're swinging for the absolute fences because if everything breaks your way, your team's unstoppable. That's just the truth.
The worst is the zero RB guy in your league too will not stop talking about it too. It's just like the zero RB guy is like so head over heels about zero RB. He's like, you gotta try it one year. It's a good time. Like I did it 2 years ago and took me to the ship, and it's like I'm not doing that. I'm like, no, thank you, you psychopath. But it's
I've done it a lot, and I've done it many times. Not always successfully, but when it works for sure.
It's exhilarating.
In a format you can play 4 wide receivers in, I'm thumbs up. Standard home league with just 3 flexes, 2 running backs. Pretty lukewarm unless like that's just what the draft is telling me to do.
Yeah. If you're in a standard league too, I'm almost like entirely avoiding it.
Oh no, yeah. This is for full PPR, bros.
This is for sure
It matters
PPR.
where you draft. Like I would only do this on the wrap. Like picks almost 3 through 10, even or 3 through 9. I would never touch this strategy, and you got to have a cast iron stomach if you want to do this for a full season, because it's not very fun when it doesn't go your way. But
speaking of cast iron stomachs, let's head over to my build here, because you got to have some cojones to take Travis Kelce where he's going right now at the 105. I did 2 builds here just to show our viewers and listeners what a elite tight end build could look like. The first one that we have up here is I took Travis Kelce 5th overall. That's where he's going right now on Sleeper ADP. He might be going like 7 or 8 on ESPN, different sites. So I'd have to pull the Fantasy Pros ADP, but you're going to have to take him in that 5 to 8 range. I 3 months ago after Kelce's season was like, he's the greatest advantage of all time. He had one of the best seasons of all time. He's tight end Jerry Rice. I'm taking him in the first 5 picks. And it's all, fine and dandy when you're saying that after the season, but things kind of change the minute you're up on the clock and you actually are deciding to take Travis Kelce with your first pick. Now, if you're in like pick like 10 to 12 range, if for some reason somebody's getting a little gun shy about Kelce, go ahead. If you're taking him at like the end and you can immediately pick up like a Chubb or a Pollard and then you can just hammer wide receivers, I would do that. Like a lot. I think I would take him above a Stephon Diggs. I'd take him above an A.J. Brown. Like I feel pretty comfortable with that. But when you're taking him ahead of Tyreek Hill and Cooper Kupp and Bijan Robinson, you're in a situation here where you're building out a team that you're going to need to have a strong stomach, in my opinion here, because you're going to feel short on running back or you're going to feel short on wide receiver. Something's going to feel weak. Now, again, you have Travis Kelce, who is the greatest positional advantage like ever last season. What he put up in terms of what he scored versus the rest of the tight end field was truly astronomical. However, I take Kelce first. Amon-Ra St. Brown falls to me. Fantastic. I have my anchor wide receiver. I have Travis Kelce. And then ideally in round 3, I really want a running back. Running back dries up. I'm not really trying to take ETN. I'm not really trying to take Najee Harris or Aaron Jones. ETN probably would have been the pick for me, or maybe even Mondre. But what happened was Devontae Smith falls. And I'm like, okay, well, now I have an opportunity to have a really good wide receiver room. So I'm going to take Amon-Ra St. Brown and Devontae Smith. Then chaos ensues, and I am now having to make a decision on like Dameon Pierce, who I love, or Breece Hall. And it's like Breece Hall has a higher upside than Dameon Pierce, even though I love Dameon Pierce. So now I'm taking Breece Hall, who's major question marks. And then I'm just, hammering wide receivers in the mid rounds because I don't want to get caught up in the dead zone here. So I take Drake London and Christian Watson. So my wide receiver room is Amon-Ra St. Brown, Devontae Smith, Drake London, Christian Watson. So automatically my wide receivers are great, right? So I'm not light on wide receiver. My tight end is elite. And then my running backs are Breece Hall, Rashad White, Antonio Gibson. I went late round QB because you basically have to. If you take a mid round QB when you don't feel great about your running backs or wide receivers, like you can't skip on that. Like if you take Kelce or an elite tight end, you pretty much have to go late round QB in my opinion, because you're already sacrificing so much positional value at the top of your draft with Kelce to take a Hurts, to take a Fields. Like, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Like, you're basically going 0 RB in that instance with Kelce. And I don't know. But I feel pretty good about the squad. I ended up with Sky Moore, Jalen Warren. I felt like, I have to take a steady Eddie quarterback to pair with Anthony Richardson. My steady Eddies were gone at this point because I felt like I had to take a Warren and a Moore. So I went with Brock Purdy to pair with Anthony Richardson. And then I ended the draft with Jonathan Mingo. So I think all in all, I feel pretty good about my team's overall upside. But if you're going to take Kelsey at the 105, 106, you basically have to throw a no-hitter throughout the draft. And I felt like I kind of did that with my wide receivers and Amon-Ra St. Brown, Devonta Smith, Drake London, and Christian Watson. But, there's an opportunity. There's a point in the season where I might not have the starting running back on any of my teams. Like Breece Hall could be the backup. Rashad White may lose reps to Sean Tucker. Antonio Gibson may get phased out for Brian Robinson. And Jalen Warren might just stay behind Najee. I can make a legitimate claim that by the end of the season, every single guy on my team could be a backup. But then also Breece Hall could be the star. Rashad White could be an absolute steal. Gibson comes to fruition. Like, you're kind of like, as Aidan likes to say, a box of chocolates, right? Like a Forrest Gump. You never know what you're going to get here. I know what I'm going to get out of Kelsey. I know what I'm going to get in my wide receivers. But I'm just going to be like really cobbling it together at my RB spots. So it kind of feels like honestly, like a zero build if you go Kelsey that early. But I felt like that was good to try and good to do and share the viewers. And it was good for me to eat my own medicine here because I was like, Kelsey at 5 is a no-brainer. But now you actually put it into practice and it's push comes to shove. It's a little bit different. I do like the other draft, though. So, Keegan, if you could pull up my other draft, because I think there's 2 elite tight ends that you can take in fantasy this season. One is Travis Kelce. The other is Mark Andrews. And I know Mark Andrews had a so-so year last year. He was injured, but his start at the beginning of last season, he put up like 24 fantasy points per game in like five out of 6 weeks to start last season. So in this build, I think this is just truly a special one. Picking here from the 103.
This one's
start
awesome.
with Christian. Yeah, it's insane. I start with Christian McCaffrey. I get Jalen Waddle as my wide receiver 2. Then I take Mark Andrews. So I'm covered on running back that I can anchor to. I'm pretty covered here on Jalen Waddle as a wide receiver I can anchor to. Then I get Andrews. Now, push comes to shove, Andrews might not make it. Andrews just might be the guy that the guy on the 2-3 turn is just taking or the team 2 is taking. Mm-hmm. If Andrews is there in the second round and you feel really strong about the value that Andrews brings because he's a onesie position, he has a realistic chance of scoring as many points per game as Travis Kelce does this season. We believe in the Ravens offense. So if you feel a high conviction play and the fact that you could take Mark Andrews in front of Jalen Waddle, I wouldn't kill you for it. I really wouldn't. But in this instance, best of both worlds, I get Mark Andrews. And then as you can see here, because I didn't feel like I was so light on my positions, easy opportunity to take Justin Fields here in the 4th round. I didn't feel underweight on running back or wide receiver. And then you know what to do. It's clobbering time. Drake London in the 5th, George Pickens in the 6th, Rashad White in the 7th. I'm just going to draft every share of Rashad White, it sounds like. Gabe Davis in the 8th, Herbert in the 9th, Sky Moore in the 10th. I tanked my Bigsby in the 11th, Kendre Miller in the 12th, and then again, I'm showing my cards here with Jonathan Mingo too. So in this instance, I went anchor, right? It was an anchor running back where I took McCaffrey at the 1.3, and then I didn't take another running back till Rashad White at 7.3. If that happened in my draft, and I'm doing backflips. If I walk away with Waddle, London, Pickens, Fields, Andrews, McCaffrey, and then it's Rashad White, I mean, that is truly special. So honestly, 3rd round Andrews is slowly becoming one of my favorite strategies to employ because you're just doing a hero RB essentially with 3rd round Andrews. That just kind of feels really good. Like I that's kind of where I'm at. What do you guys think?
I think this is the better way to do it. Oh, sorry to cut you off there, Aidan. I was just going to say, I think it's the better way to do it if you're doing the elite tight end because Kelsey's such a steep price. Like it's the same as the like 0 RB build, right? You have to hit on every pick that you have because you're taking an opportunity away to draft one of the positions that takes up the most roster spaces, right? Like most of you guys will only play in a league that carries 1 tight end, and most people will have a flex option, but you won't start a tight end ever in the flex. And you start 2 running backs every week. You start at least 2 wide receivers. Like you lose so much value in your draft by taking Kelsey in the 1st and not getting an elite guy. So this gives you a much more unique build while also still getting an elite tight end. And like you said, Shaun, if you think Andrews is the guy, take him here at 210 because you're going to have your pick between Waddle, Devonta Smith, Chris Olave, maybe you get a Jalen Hurts. There's still T. Higgins. Like, you're not walking away with a bad draft. If you feel conviction at 210, just do it, But the team feels so much more balanced this way. Like you said, Shaun, you're starting running back, you got your starting wide receiver, you got your starting tight end, you got an elite quarterback with elite rushing upside, and now you just build out the rest of your roster, and it feels less scary for sure.
I think the thing you look at too is it kind of feels like we're buying Kelsey at his all-time high, right? He had his
highest.
best season.
1,000%.
The tight ends have never been worse. And again, I don't think Travis Kelce's going to have a bad season whatsoever, but is he going to give you the positional advantage that he gave you last season? Probably not, because it was historic. So it just kind of feels like you're getting him at an all-time high. So if he falls for some reason to the 9th, 10th pick, yeah, pull the trigger. Like, that is fantastic value because he will lead this team 100% in the passing game. But I think I prefer Mark Andrews at the end of the 2nd or the 3rd round. I think he's such a slam dunk as a 3rd-round pick.
Yeah, I agree. I think getting Kelsey even last year, like, I was hesitant to pull trigger, like that wrap at the 2 spot. And in retrospect, like, that should have been like an absolute yes decision. Whereas here, like, that like 4 to 6 range taking him, it's just, you've got to have
that's where
this.
Andrews is going.
You got to have
Andrews
the stones.
is going in the same spot Kelsey went last year.
Yeah,
so like,
whereas
Shaun
Andrews makes
wanted
a
to
ton
murder
of
me
sense here.
earlier this year, like early in the offseason when I was like, I would not touch Travis Kelsey at 5.
capitulation.
10-foot
It's
pole.
capitulation. It's
I'm not doing
capitulation.
drafts.
I
What I think
in
is
best ball, easy money, but in redraft, it's a whole different story.
what I think is cool about this draft too is like you pretty much ripped like 3 out of our 6 strategies in one, which like there's going to be a ton of overlap in these strategies, but like you've got your hero RB because when you go like the hero tight end, like again to your point, like you're going to be thin kind of somewhere else, but like you went your hero RB, so you're like, okay, I can't really take more running backs in that range, and then you go hero QB too, so it's like bam, 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 and then you just hammer your flex positions, like. Because like with your onesie positions, when you're taking them this high, there's no need to have another one on your roster with this roster construction. So at that point, you can pretty much cross out those 2 tabs or however you're drafting, and it's like, give me all the running backs, give me all the wide receivers, and you are just absolutely hammering those positions, especially wide receiver in a 2 flex build.
Yep. All right, Aidan, you're on to the next one. You have
We've got
late
hero
round
late
QB.
Oh,
You have
late
late
round
round
QB.
QB. So you got 2 of the best ones.
We've actually kind of touched on this a bit. If you just kind of look at the board in general here, Keegan, too, if you don't mind backing up. I went with Richardson and Geno Smith. I think in terms of like the late QBs, there's 2 guys that make a ton of sense here for us. That's Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones. I think those guys at ADP are absolutely awesome plays given their dual threat abilities. Anthony Richardson, as you've already seen with Shaun's last build, you absolutely need to tie him to someone a bit more stable. And pretty much the 2 best guys, in my opinion, to do that to would be a guy like Geno, finished his QB5 last year, or maybe a guy like Kirk Cousins. He's not sexy, we know it, but Kirk's probably going to stumble into QB10 again. That's fine. If Anthony Richard doesn't completely smash, what we think he's going to do, that's totally okay. So I kind of did it with my first build. Like, if you look there in the 9th round, you've got Tua right before I took Anthony Richardson. So to a degree, I did take it the first time, but this one was intentional. I went into the draft thinking, I want to absolutely hammer running back and wide receiver. I will figure out quarterback later. I wasn't even looking at QBs until I pretty much got to round 8. It wasn't really on my mind, which gave me a ton of freedom. I think the 6th spot here, too, was really fun for this. As you can kind of see, I just teeter-totter between wide receiver and running back. It's not intentional that it did it that way. I knew I wanted to fill these positions. I had Tyreek, was stoked about that. Pollard at that 6th spot on the way back, I'm taking every single time. Devontae fell there. I'm not taking him over a Mondre or an Aaron Jones at running back. I could have gone Burrow if I was going elite QB, but at that point I was like, I'm not taking QB. I know that. Love Devontae there. Bring it back with another running back in Dameon Pierce. So I've checked my 2 running backs, my 2 wide receivers. At that point, I've got 2 open flexes. Check both of those box with DJ and Lockett on the way back. A recurring theme here, we've got another share of James Cook, who I think he's such a good running back 2 or 3 in PPR leagues. Like,
I want my percentage.
Yeah,
I want it. I was in early.
Yeah,
I want it.
Just quick side note: while we were drafting this weekend, we're watching the Bills and Bears preseason game, and I'm just watching this guy like run around catching passes, and I was like, this is making me feel something, and I ended up taking him 5 minutes later. I was like, yeah, no,
I was so annoyed.
I don't
He
care if
goes,
this is an
"Oh,
overreaction.
Damian Harris rushing touchdown," and I was like, "Did you see him, James Cook, catch like 4 balls and like march them down the field?" And he was like, "Kinda." So
I was like, wow, Josh Allen throwing them too. This was Josh Allen throwing checkdowns and design passes to James Cook. So I was like, yes, gimme, as they say on the program. So we got James Cook. Bring it on back. We've got Zay Flowers as wide receiver 5. And then I get to my QB zone. So at this point, I've got 8 really strong flex plays. I've got 5 wide receivers, 3 running back. Stoked at this point. Gimme Anthony Richardson just screams upside. Geno Smith on top of him. Got a little Tank Bigsby action there. I think he's one of the better handcuffs. I think the fantasy community has totally let the secret out, but Tank Bigsby's here to stay. He's going to have a role in that offense. How big, we'll see, but awesome handcuff to have. Laporta late, and then there he is again. I've got Nico Collins at the end. So I thought this is a fun one. This is probably more common too in terms of the late QB, especially if you're playing in a 12-team league. If you're closer to 8 or 10, obviously everyone's gonna, there's less teams, so more people are gonna land that elite QB. But when we think about the top 7, 8 QBs, when you're in a 12-team league, multiple teams are doing late QB. So this is one that's far more common these days as we've kind of got those tiers of QBs. But I think this is a fun one. I would not panic at all in your drafts if you're kind of doing a late QB build. Sometimes it's not worth the reach on the quarterbacks, especially if you're in the middle here like myself. There's rounds where I could have reached, like if you look at round 4, I probably could have reached for Herbert or Fields if I really wanted an elite QB. There probably could have reached on Lawrence on the way back at 5, would have been almost a full round ahead of him. But this build is totally fine. I'm fine waiting on QB. There are serviceable guys here. The quarterback position has gotten so deep over the last couple of years, especially as more and more guys are developing this dual threat ability. So I'm all in on 2 QB builds. I think they're a good time.
Create a platoon. I have 4 guys that I want in my platoon. Like, I'm not going to pick 4, but I want Anthony Richardson, right? I want his upside. My other guy I want in a platoon as an upside play is Tua. I think Tua is a sleeping giant if he stays healthy, and the Miami defense is great. Both very risky. So other guys I'd pair with them are Geno Smith and Daniel Jones. So those are my pairs that I would like to partner with, kind of the higher risk guys. 2 QB builds are great. I love that you went like late round tight end with it. So it's just like, I'm just going to maximize wide receiver and running back because I have to, because I'm going to carry an extra spot. You could have even gone 2 tight ends here too, in a kind of wacky world, so to speak. Keegan, I have you here for
this is
elite
elite
QB.
Yes,
Elite QB.
Elite QB build. And this is actually how I've been doing a ton of both my best ball drafts. This is how I've been doing my like redrafts now that I'm like 5 deep already this year. And it's similar to some of the other things we showed us, but I really love doing this because I think, and you see these patterns of color, right? Like I anchor it here with Christian McCaffrey because when I say elite QB, I'm not going to take a QB in the first round. I think what you do is the perfect range to do this elite QB is, I think, close to the wrap here at the end, because I don't really want to spend up and miss out on St. Brown, Waddle, Jacobs, Henry, AJ Brown, or anybody like that. I want to wait until some of those, like that tier of players is gone, and then I'll strike right here at this second spot, because I know that I'm at a wrap, I'm still going to get a really good guy. So I go with Jalen Hurts, who is my most drafted quarterback this year in fantasy for sure, without a doubt. And what it does is it gives me, I think, a quarterback that could average 25, 27 points a game. I obviously start with McCaffrey, which is great, but I do this intentionally with McCaffrey here, knowing what I'm going to do rounds 3 through 6 here. I know in my head that once I draft a QB and a running back that I think are, potential running back 1, QB 1, I'm just going to hammer wide receivers. And Devontae Smith, Drake London, Christian Watson, Deontay Johnson, who I'm starting to come around a little bit on, especially in PPR formats. It's a great way,
Welcome.
I think. Yes.
Welcome, brother.
This
Welcome.
This is, I think, one of my favorite strategies to do if you are drafting in a home league against people who are like just now waking up. It's late August and they're just now listening to their first fantasy football podcast in the year. If you've been watching us, you've probably been watching fantasy football content a bulk of the summer. You're probably pretty in the waters of what's going on. This is, I think, a great way to get advantage in your home league. Snag an elite QB after you've got an elite talent. That could be, and you could do this with a flip flop too. So you could do this with like Tyreek here, draft a quarterback, and then hammer the running back position. But we do like to avoid this area a bit. So I go the opposite, just grab 4 wide receivers who I think are ballers. And I just do the same trend here and grab 3 running backs back to back that I think have safe floors that will play a majority of the season, and they'll be good plug and play guys. I don't need something crazy because I've already got McCaffrey. I go back to the wide receiver well, and in a build like this, I have punted on the tight end position. And so what I've done here is I think I have 4 safe floor running backs. I get 5 wide receivers that I really like for the first 10 rounds, and I actually double tap the tight end position. I know that with this build, I'm going to lose out on some points weekly in tight end. And now it's not the biggest deal because tight end 12s, the gap between like tight end 5 and tight end like 12, 13 is minimal in past years. Now we think this will change a little bit, but there's still some great options. Luke Musgrave is going to be like almost in every down like tight end. And Sam Laporta has been drafted to replace Hawkinson. So I waited intentionally. And if you're drafting like this type of strategy, or you feel like your draft is scooping up some tight end value, just wait. Just wait. Double tap the position. You're going to have an elite wide receiver room. You're going to have an elite running back. You'll have an elite quarterback. Like, wait on your tight end position and then wrap it up with like a late round flyer. Nico Collins, again, one of our draft boards. Funny thing is, none of us have seen each other's draft boards until we recorded tonight. So we didn't know prior what a bunch of our late round guys are, just like tipping our hands here with Jalen Warren, Nico Collins, James Cook, and all those similarities.
So
but
funny.
I think for me personally, this is my favorite way to build a team, especially with how good the elite quarterbacks are these days. And we talk about positional advantages with tight end like Kelsey and Andrews. The positional advantage you do get from drafting a Hurts and Allen, a Jackson, a Mahomes, it can be scary. You know, you never want to play the guy who starts Patrick Mahomes, right? You don't want to go into the week and be like, fuck, look who I drew this week. And you just hate it. So I think this protects me from that, gives me a good, like, super elite running back. And then I love this wide receiver room. I love this. And you just try and balance it out with safe floor plays. I wouldn't call Gibson the safest floor play, but I think Jamal Williams in the first 4 weeks is super safe. And Rachaad White's PPR value is a very, very safe floor. So,
Yeah, I mean, you basically executed a perfect hero RB build where instead of taking an early tight end or taking running backs, you basically just said, I'm taking the quarterback. You're taking quarterback round 2. You basically faded the entire dead zone, came out of it pretty much unscathed, and said, you know what, it's time to take some running backs here. Rachaad White, Gibson, Williams. I think it's very interesting when looking at the late round QB build that Aidan had, where it was like, you know, like I'm just gonna pick my favorite flavor, best player available. There's not really a lot of like strategy involved with that because it's just like I'm just gonna let the board fall to me. If you take an early round QB, you kind of have to be super intentional about how you're going to approach it, because you're going to either try and avoid the dead zone or you're trying to predict the dead zone hits, right? Because there are going to be hits there, but that's a little bit trickier, right? This is, I think, less variance. So I like this build. I think I'm taking both of these builds. I think Hero RB is the best build. I think in a Hero RB strategy, I'm happy to take a quarterback early. I'm happy to take 2 quarterbacks late. I really am. I think both are totally viable. I really think the only strategy so far that's just been tough to swallow is that Kelsey build. It's been tough.
It's
really
really tough.
Expensive. It's
tough.
expensive.
Shaun, I like what you said too about the late round QB strategy. Is like it really just becomes best player available. Like when you do when you use high capital on the onesie position, you have to be intentional with drafts. You have to like kind of be really heavy. And this is an extreme example, but this is probably exactly how I would also execute this if I was doing a real draft right now, like 4 wide receivers, 3 more running backs. And, you know, with Aidan's late round example, it's best player available. I like that this guy fell to me. Like, I do kind of have to go grab guys that I want, maybe not at a pick I want, but just because, like, I think it's important for me to get a wide receiver here. Like Christian Watson, this is a great example. If you're drafted from this spot, you've got 2 wide receivers that you think are good, but Drake London and Devontae Smith would have to have, pretty monster seasons to be top 8 finishes or something. But I'm here at a wide receiver again. I'm like, I really need another one. And I'm looking at the board. I'm like, oh, I'm not picking until 6'10 again. Yeah, Godwin, Judy, Waller, Hawkinson. I don't want the quarterback here. I take a swing, right? Like maybe Christian could go a little bit later, but it's important to pay attention to how the draft is going around you so you can make sure that you're picking up somebody and not missing on a position of value like wide receiver as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to make. It's like you need to be very aware of teams around you and who already has what, because at that point, like you can kind of go process of elimination. Like he's not taking a QB here; he's already got his, or he's already got his tight end. It's like you can kind of play games to agree in terms of just figuring out what's actually going to be there for you as you kind of navigate some of these different builds.
This last one is crazy. This last one I think is probably the craziest way to build a team, but what will also happen, I think, is maybe one of the most likely outcomes in a home league draft.
Telling you, if you were at the end of your draft, things could get weird. Like if you're drafting in the 11, 12 range, 10 even too, you're looking at a situation where you may not be taking a lot of wide receivers early because the best players available to you are just so far and away the running backs. So we call this a robust RB build. It is taking 3 running backs probably with your first 3, 4, 5 picks. Mm-hmm. You're playing a running back in your flex. Now, I like to play a wide receiver in my flex, but the teams where you're starting 3 running backs, they're usually really fucking good. Like, full stop. If you got 3 horses in the stable that you're starting as like top 15 plays, you're probably feeling pretty good about this squad. So I start with Saquon Barkley at the 110, right? You're thinking, all right, I'm going to hero RB this, I'm going to hero build this. And then all of a sudden, CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Devontae Adams are off the board. You're kind of at the drawing board here, right? For some reason, running backs aren't there. I mean, for some reason, receivers aren't there. So you got to take a running back. So you take Tony Pollard. So you have Saquon and Pollard. You're feeling awesome. You're on cloud 9 here. And then you get a little greedy. Because you don't necessarily love some of these receivers that are out here. I don't really want to take, I don't know, DK's gone, Devontae Smith's gone. I don't want to take Amari Cooper. Of course, Calvin Ridley, someone I love and adore. I normally, maybe if I need to get aggressive, I take Calvin Ridley in the 3rd, but I just kind of say, fuck it. I'm going to take ETN. So I'm starting this draft with Saquon, Pollard, and ETN. I mean, you got to feel like you're storming the beaches of Normandy, right? This is like as boomer as a build as you can get here, right? You are honoring your grandfather. You're honoring your great-grandpa with a build like this. This is for the lost generation. And I feel really good about these running backs, and then it's like, okay, I got to hammer wide receivers. So I take Calvin Ridley in the 4th, and you know what? I'm just feeling greedy about the Jags. I want Trevor Lawrence. I want to show
craziest team stack.
I want to show everybody what it's like when you take Lawrence in the middle rounds, because I will be drafting Lawrence and Herbert on some of my teams. I'm a Konami code guy, but I think that the middle class of QB has some great opportunity this year. So I need to show our viewers what a middle round QB looks like. So I take Lawrence, feeling great. I got the stack secured. And then it's just receiver hammer time. I take Ayuk, I take Deontay Johnson, I take Brandon Cooks. I'm good at running back. I really don't need more because I have those 3 dudes. But I take Zach Charbonnet. I take Sky Moore with the next pick. I go late round tight end, take Higbee. Jalen Warren, and again, I took Mingo with my last pick, showing my cards
Shocker
here.
On those last 2.
This might be more indicative of if you play in a league where you start 2 receivers, 2 running backs, 1 flex, because running backs are going to be more valued than wide receivers in that instance. And I'm not playing 4 wide receivers or 4 running backs in a given game. So it kind of gives me positional strength. And again, I would not do a robust RB if your guys are taking are like Saquon, Mixon, and Najee or something. I'm only going robust RB if I feel really good about the 3 running backs. And normally ETN I like, but he has some dead zone characteristics. But ETN as my 3rd running back is just an absolute no-brainer in my opinion. So I feel pretty good about this squad. But yes, this is not for the faint of heart. This is the robust RB strategy. But receivers are just so good this year down the board. You can just you could take some really good ones that go super late in redraft. So that's
build makes me sick to my stomach.
Yeah, the board needs to shake out
everything about me.
it's gotta like fall weird for this to like. You're typically not going into a draft thinking like this is what I'm gonna do. Like
No.
this is a like a reactive type build. You're like, okay, this is like things have gotten weird, Mom. Like I need you to come pick me up because like there are
Mom, I
no wide
drafted a third
receivers.
running back. Come pick me up.
Yeah, like because like I look at Pollard and probably like the only guy I'd consider probably doing there is like Garrett Wilson. I think I'd be fine taking Garrett Wilson there and being like, okay, I don't know. Some
Over
people
Pollard or Chubb? No way. I'm not doing
yeah,
it.
it's like it's the only guy that I would consider. Like I'm not doing Waddle, I'm not doing Olave, I'm not doing Higgins, and then once you get to ETN, once you got Devontae and DK gone there, it's like you've been backed into a corner at this point. You maybe could have gone QB, like maybe you go Lamar, and you're like, all right, fuck it, I'm going elite QB on top of this. But yeah,
Wow. To have three running backs, if I'd have three running backs still if I went Lamar.
That's like a prime spot in the order where like this could happen. Like it's probably not going to happen at the start of the order. In the middle, you'll have a bit of wiggle room too. It's like this is a weird spot where like this could happen, and you've got to be ready to roll with the punches.
I think it happens more towards the 9,
That's what I was thinking.
like the 9, 10, 11, 12. That is where the Chubbs and Pollards live. Like you're in a realistic opportunity, right? Where if you're at the pick 12 and you're like, I'm just going to double down on Chubb and Pollard, which I think a lot of people are. Some people are going to go onesies and pick, not onesies, but they're going to pick Pollard and ARSB or Pollard and Wilson. But some people will get cute and drop both of them. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I might have to take Jahmyr Gibbs here. Like I don't know if I want Debo. I don't really know if I want like Amari Cooper. I guess Calvin Ridley's in play. Calvin Ridley's probably in play if you go that route, right? So I lucked out with Ridley coming back to me. Ridley would have probably been a good pick in the third round too.
Yep.
Could have been Kenneth Walker too.
No, I would have thrown if I looked at you.
No, not four RBs to start. That's insane.
With a
oh my
flex
goodness.
roster, it's like
if you were playing 4 running backs in your lineup,
you've probably put yourself in like a losing roster, or you
have the greatest roster of all time. Or imagine if all 4 of those running backs are good and hit, no one's beating you because you have 4 good running backs. Like that's like the hardest position to get.
Yeah, it's
crazy.
It'd be absolute miracles.
I think the only thing I would change, because I think Calvin Ridley will be a wide receiver 1 this year. It's such a good, I think, pick, like outside of maybe DK and then Calvin next. But the only thing I think I would change differently is I would probably go to try and add a rookie, I think, or like you did here, like with Sky Moore, like second-year breakout candidate, somebody that has a much like higher vaulted ceiling. Like so instead of Cooks, I think maybe I go like if Dotson was there, I would have taken Dotson.
Would have loved Dotson. There.
Oh,
and you could talk me into Zay, where you took Cooks as well too. Would love to be taking somebody like JSN here, but the risk is a bummer. And obviously he went before, but that's the only thing I think I would change here. It's just like one more young wide receiver that I think could absolutely explode, like Zay. Maybe not QJ. I don't think he profiles like that, but you guys get what I'm saying.
At the end of next season, how shocked would you be if it's like Brandon Cooks was a top 24 wide receiver and he outscored all the rookies?
I personally would be shocked.
I'd be really surprised.
I would personally be shocked if he was like, you could talk me maybe like 25, maybe right at 24, but that would be, that would be asking a lot, I think.
All the rookie wide receivers, I'd be shocked because
maybe JSN beats him, but I mean, like he's that's gonna be a high volume offense.
I was thinking JA. I think JA is volume.
Jordan Addison.
Well, now we're into player takes.
Now we're
just talking draft strategy. Yes,
we're talking.
I was just trying to say
we'll save that for our next mock draft. That's it. Those are our 6 strategies that we have here today. We have hero RB, zero RB. We've got late round. We've got elite tight end. We've got late round QB. We've got elite quarterback, and we have robust running back. Some oddball ones out there for sure. I think hero RB is the strategy, and if you want to take an early QB or not, that's kind of the decision you'll have to make. So start with a running back, and then just be like, am I going to take a quarterback early? I'm going to take one late. If you want to take one in the middle rounds, just understand the opportunity cost there that you are going to be missing out on some really, really high-value wide receivers when you do that. Keegan, before we hop, anything you have to say for the listeners?
Dude, this might be the year that Aidan might finally make playoffs in our home league after his skid
What?
for a couple years.
It's
I'm
a
not.
no. I can't believe I'm getting dragged on the outro. I'm a wagon.
Rough go
No,
for
you did
Holler.
not. You
That
did
was
not
crazy.
just do that. We don't. What? Oh my
Also, I
goodness.
just want to say I thought that we handled it well, but the three of us will have to be prepared for a ton of home league slander this year.
Oh, for sure.
I'm
And I
already
can't
ready
wait.
for it, Chief. I'm going 6 for 6. I'm winning all my leagues, baby. Let's go. Until next time, everybody. Thank you for tuning in.